Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your daily source for Black news, views, and opinions. Today is Tuesday, July 5th, and I'm Mimi Brown.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo, and on today's report, the right to vote for women is only a little more than a century old, but black women's suffrage has only been around since 1965. So today, we take a deeper look at how black women helped fight for the right to vote. Meanwhile, a Black Florida group that helped the formerly incarcerated get the voting rights back is now working to stop the violence in one American town. Then, underserved black neighborhoods in Chicago have less trees than white areas, and we're going to tell you why that's a problem.
Plus, it's a battle of two of the biggest sneaker companies in the world. Adidas is suing Nike over a phone app. We'll tell you why. And we've all heard about the baby formula shortage, but have you heard about the sriracha shortage? Yeah, we'll tell you what's going on with that popular hot sauce. We have all that and so much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's get it.
Well, it's been 103 years since Congress passed the 19th Amendment. This would go on to be ratified in the summer of 1920, officially giving white women the right to vote. But black women wouldn't truly be able to vote until 1865 with the passage of the Voting Rights Act. Now, today, even with a woman vice president, women still lag behind in political representation. There are women still plagued by inequalities in everything from medical policy to domestic disputes. The women's suffrage has often been framed as the end of the movement, but honestly, there's still work to do. And joining me to talk about this and more is Democratic strategist Bree Maxwell. She's the former political director for Jamie Harrison, who ran for U.S. Senate in South Carolina. Bree, thank you for being here.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So as I said, it's been more than 100 years since Congress passed the 19th Amendment, but what do you think is still the biggest challenge facing women today?
So I don't think it's a challenge necessarily facing women. I think, some of the bigger challenges are basically with black women and basically representation and people being able to believe that women and even black women can be in leadership roles, and that our votes absolutely matter.
You're right. I know many of the policies we're trying to fight are coming from the state legislature where women are underrepresented, but we're actually underrepresented in every facet of government in, the House and the Senate. But more women are expressing interest in running for office. If we are the majority, though, of this country, how do we change the balance? How do we as women make sure we're reflected at every level of the government when it comes to policy?
Well, one, we have to make sure that women are supporting women. I can give you an example of that. Yesterday, we had our governor primary in the state of South Carolina, and we had a black woman who ran for governor, and she did not win. But what we say across the board is that, black women are the biggest voting bloc in the Democratic Party. But yet, when it comes to black women being in leadership, it does not reflect that. But in order for us to make sure that we have more women who are at the table, we need to make sure that we are pushing women. And it can't just be women pushing women. It has to also be men pushing women. And women need to make sure that they are also doing the things that they need to do to get the support and to also gain the experience, because we also know that you can be a mediocre man and go out, run for office and be successful. But women, we have to work twice as hard. So we have to make sure that we're doing what we need to do as well to make sure that we can get in these leadership roles.
Absolutely. Women definitely have to work twice as hard, especially black women. When we look back at the 19th Amendment and we look at what's happening at that time, there were people like Elizabeth Stanton and other women who were only focused on white women. I think it was Sojourner Truth that gave that famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" So is there still that divide today? A majority of white women we know still overwhelmingly support Republican. They vote Republican. Are we more unified today? Do those divides still exist?
So the funny thing is, we have a lot more women groups that are supporting women to be in leadership roles and to run for office. But we also know that white Republican women are going to follow the lead of white Republican men. And we saw that with the Donald Trump election. We saw how Donald Trump has basically treated women. We saw how Donald Trump talks to women. But what did white women do? They voted for Donald Trump. They voted for other Republican men. So yes, I do believe that part of the problem is getting some white women on board to realize, look, sometimes you have to vote your interest and not your husband's interest. And so I think that's part of the problem. And then, you know, we give a lot of thanks to Georgia for leading the way in 2020. But what we also are not talking about is the fact that Georgia was the first state to vote against women's suffrage back when it came about. So we also have to think about that, because it was a southern state and they were afraid that too many women, especially Black women, would get power. So we also have to think about the nature of the beast of such things as that. But at this point, women have to learn how to vote their interests and support their own interests and not the interests of men.
Mm-hmm. You know, I want to talk a little bit about Black women and, you know, what we bring to the table. We are considered the backbone of the Democratic Party. Why do you think that is?
Because we're the biggest voting bloc. And that's just been evident since we have been able to vote Democrat. We vote in our interests. We will vote to make sure that we're taking care of our household, because in most instances, we are carrying our households. We're voting to make sure that our kids have health care. We're voting to make sure that we have proper infrastructure, whether it's clean drinking water, better roads and bridges, or even broadband access in our communities. Because in a lot of instances, not only are we taking care of our children, but we're taking care of our siblings, we're taking care of our nieces, our nephews, our parents, our grandparents. And not only that, we're taking care of the men that we love. And we also know that Black men are incarcerated at high rates. So we're also voting for criminal justice reform and public safety to make sure that our communities are safe and that police aren't out here just randomly killing people as they have been doing in the past. So when Black women vote their interests.
We seem to carry the whole world on our shoulders. Everything you just named there, Bree, was a little bit of everything, every little facet that Black women have made it their mission to kind of oversee and make sure, you know, not only our interests are centered, but the ones that we love. So that was actually a really good point. But let's talk about the GOP and how African American women are being treated by party leaders in the GOP. Do you think that there's any growth for Black women in that party?
You know, I can't speak to that because I'm not a member of the GOP and I will never be a member of the GOP. I think what they do probably use Black women as is probably a diversity card, just to make sure that they are showing that, look, we have Black women leadership within our party. So yes, if I can elevate a Black woman in the GOP to be a lieutenant governor or what have you as a Republican or R behind her name, then guess what? That's what they're probably going to do, because they are about show and they're not about doing the work. So yes, if they can elevate a Black woman, to them, it's a form of outreach. So yes, they will do that. But does it really matter and does it really work if you're not speaking to the issues plaguing your people? Mm-hmm. So no.
Yeah, it's just symbolism with them. Stacey Abrams is running for governor of Georgia for the second time, and Florida Congresswoman Val Demings is running against Marco Rubio for his Senate seat. Can we expect to see more Black women throwing their hand in the statewide races?
Absolutely. Like I just said, you know, we had a Black woman run for governor of the state of South Carolina. We have 3 Black women currently running for U.S. Senate against Tim Scott. We have a runoff with 2 of the Black women. So hopefully in 2 weeks, we'll find out which one Black woman will be running against Tim Scott. And, you know, that's a big deal in South Carolina, because the Black woman who ran for governor, she made history by being the first Black woman to run for governor in the state of South Carolina. So I do believe more Black women will be throwing their hat in the ring. But it becomes an issue of support, making sure that not only do they have support from the party, but also make sure they have financial support, because that is a huge barrier with Black women running for office, not having the donor base to make sure that they can pay staff, pay an experienced staff, and making sure that they can pay for the materials and resources that they need to be on the ground. So more Black women will be running, but we have to make sure we are supporting them.
That's right. We need to support them. Thank you so much, Bree Maxwell. Thank you for joining us. We'd love to have you back. All right.
Look forward to it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great interview, Mimi. One of the most influential people in Washington is quietly taking on some of the most challenging issues in the country. Susan Rice is the director of the White House's Domestic Policy Council. As director, she has been called on to tackle the gun violence problem in this country. Rice, as many know, is not new to Washington or the White House. She was served as the National Security Advisor to President Obama. Rice was also the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. The former diplomat, who rarely does interviews, is also being tasked with leading roundtables on racial equity and the eviction crisis.
More than 2,000 first-person accounts of slavery in the United States are now available on the Library of Congress website. Born is Slavery. Slave narratives from the Writers Project were recorded in the 1930s of people who were enslaved. Over 2,300 African Americans agreed to share their stories. It also contains over 500 black and white photos.
And a Florida group that worked to get the formerly incarcerated their voting rights back is now working to stop gun violence. The Florida Rights Restoration Coalition is working with the city of Orlando to identify and help people that may be perpetrators or be victims of gun violence. Coalition leaders say they are realistic about how successful they will be. They say it's a long-term project that may not have immediate results. Now, in 2018, the coalition successfully ran a project called Amendment 4, which restored voting rights to most people convicted of felonies who finished their sentence. A year later, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he signed a bill prohibiting the estimated 1.4 million people who regained their right to vote from casting ballots unless they paid all of their financial obligations imposed by the court.
Black impoverished neighborhoods have less trees than white wealthier ones. The Chicago Tribune report says that between 2011 and 2021, trees were much less likely to be planted in areas with large black populations. In high-income neighborhoods, the city planted 28 trees per every mile. In black areas, there was 4 trees per mile, and researchers say that matters. Trees decrease air pollution, create more shade, which can help keep homes and apartments cool in the summer. Realtors also say that trees can increase property values. Mayor Lori Lightfoot reportedly wants to spend about $46 million over the next 5 years to plant about 75,000 trees. But even at that rate, the planting won't compensate for the lost greenery over the last decade. I want to go back to one important part because trees, it sounds like something nominal, right? But this is something that actually affects climate change as well. And so, like it says in the story there, that climate change in these areas, fewer trees in neighborhoods, in the black neighborhoods, like it says, it can mean hotter temperatures. Also, it can mean more flooding in your house, dirtier air, higher electric bills. So it's a trickle down effect. It's not just about, oh, why can't white people get more trees than us? It is so many, like a domino effect of things that plague our communities when we get less trees.
Yeah, you wouldn't think of trees being tied to racism or anything like that, So when you hear this story, you're like, why are they complaining about trees? But last month we did this story about the 3 older black women who died in their senior living home from heat exhaustion, from not having enough air, and perhaps, when we look at these neighborhoods and there's no trees in these neighborhoods for shade, they couldn't turn, I believe they couldn't turn on the air condition until June 1st. Right. Yeah. And so they had to suffer and they ended up dying. And so when we look at the deaths and we look at the things that are happening because there's no shade, it's a real issue. It's a real issue in the black community. It's a real issue. And to hear that there's only 11 trees for every 47 white trees in the white neighborhood, that is absolutely crazy when you think about it.
It's so lopsided. There was an article, and the first couple sentences said the amount of greenery on your street depends on the amount of green in your pockets. So that kind of says it all. It's very powerful. And every study shows that distribution often depends on race and class. So that's exactly what we're talking about, soulmates. They have to do better when it comes to black communities and people of color, making sure that we do have those just like other communities.
Absolutely.
All right, a young Chicago man has been honored with saving a man who fell on the train tracks. Police say Anthony Perry got off a train and saw a nearly unconscious man on the electrified third rail of the tracks. The man fell onto the tracks after a fight with someone else. He had been shocked by 600 volts of electricity, which incapacitated him. Perry pulled the man for safety. That man is in serious condition. Now, Perry's good deed was not ignored. An anti-violence group in the city gave Perry a 2009 Audi A8 and a $25 gas card. Perry says the car would make his life easier and thanked the group for giving it to him.
We love that. A new study says black women who use hair straightening products with certain chemicals may be exposing themselves to breast cancer. Now, the Breast Cancer Prevention Partners Group says toxins from parabens, which are used in many black hair products for women, are tied to breast cancer. Parabens are a group of chemicals that prevent mold and bacteria from growing in beauty products. Now, while most Americans have parabens in their bodies, black women have higher concentrations of the chemicals in their system.
I think we need to do a deep dive on that and find out which exactly chemicals we're talking about there. New research says that African American kids are less likely to be in gifted school programs, often because they're not given the tests that show that they excel in academics. The report published by Urban Education says that black children are overlooked because their schools may not offer exams to determine a student's aptitude. The study says that 40% of schools around the nation, regardless of location, never tested a single child to find out if they were academically gifted.
Federal prosecutors in Manhattan are investigating whether Wells Fargo violated anti-discrimination laws by conducting sham interviews with black female job applicants. They are accused of holding fake interviews with black women and other underrepresented groups in order to falsify diversity efforts. Wells Fargo reportedly adopted a policy that requires diverse candidates to be interviewed for jobs paying more than $100,000 annually. A whistleblower says that black women and other minorities would often be interviewed for jobs that were already filled. The whistleblower says he was fired for complaining about the issue.